All right, so next up, we are going to build our role-based access management system. All right, so because we are dealing with users and roles and stuff, let's build that next as well. So when I say role-based access management system, I mean we are going to make sure we give users permissions to different parts of the project, different parts of the platform where they have permissions. All right, so we just worked on being able to invite users to the project. And you can see that users can be given an admin, write, or read permission. And apart from that, users can also be owners. Right, so if a user is having a read permission, they are going to have different access to the project. And if they have write permission, they're going to also have different access as compared to a user with an admin permission and stuff like that. So yeah, let's see how we can build that logic for our project. It's gonna be might be a bit confusing, but I want you to stay with me. Hopefully you understand it. All right, so we are going to start from, let's go back to VS Code. All right, so we're going to start from here. Let's close this. Let's open const, and let's see. Let me add new actions.ts. All right, and I'm going to add these actions. And these actions are based on the specific things different users can do. So for example, update project, delete project, close project, view settings, view options, create options. Right? You can see things like view members, invite members, update member role, remove members, yeah, and then other stuff. All right. These actions are going to determine if a user can perform a particular action here. Now we are going to use Shadcn to create a store, and then the store is going to be an access store. All right. So inside the store, we're going to determine the permissions that the user would have. So you're going to see what I'm talking about. So here we are going to create a store. So let's create a folder. All right, store. And then I'm going to create use access store. And then I'm going to add the state here so that we see how it looks like. Here I add an interface access state, and I'm going to import the project action that we just added. All right, so here we're going to determine the permissions. The rules is creator. We are also going to have this set project access and then fetch project access. And also we are going to have this reset, where if a different user is logged in, we are going to reset the whole role so that it starts again. And then requires main role. So this requires main role is going to return a boolean. It is going to say the minimum rule that this user requires is maybe read or admin or whatever. All right, so this access state is going to have different ways of granting permissions to users. So it's not just one way. We are going to have different ways. We are going to be able to say something like, okay, so this user requires this minimum role to be able to have access to this functionality. Okay, you get what I mean? Yes. All right, so that's the starting point. Now let's actually add the store. So you can see I am doing use access store, and then I'm doing create. You can see create is imported from Shadcn. So this is how we create a store. So I am passing the interface, which is the type, and we get this set and then get. Now for the state, I am passing the permissions, the roles, the is creator. These are initially going to be empty objects. You would also realize we have this, and that. We have to set them up here as well. You can see I've filled these out. I'm going to explain them to you. All right, so for setting of the project access, you can see that we are getting the project ID, right? The permissions, the role, and then there is creator, which is part of the store. And here we do a set and we do state.permissions, which is we are spreading the default permissions that we have. And here we add project ID permissions, which basically means we are adding the permissions that we get for this project ID. So it's the same thing we do for rules and then for its creator, right? So we are basically setting the role for the particular project, and then the creator, which is the owner of the project, we are setting it for that particular project. Now here is where we actually load the details from Supabase. And so let me collapse this one and then expand this. First of all, we are getting the session to be able to get the current user. So I need to make sure I am importing Supabase. Let me do that up here. So first of all, we want to get the session, and from the session is where we're going to get the user. So we do Supabase.get session. If no session, we return. But if there is a session, what we're going to do is we are going to get the project details. The only thing we care about is the created by. That is the user who created the project. Now here, we want to get a member role. Right, so it is either the user is going to be the creator, that is the owner of the project, or the user is going to be a member. Right, so here you can see we are getting the role from the project members, and where the user ID is equal to the logged in user's ID. Right. So we are going to check if the user is the creator of the project. So we are doing project.createdby is equal to session.user ID, then they are the creator. Otherwise, we check the member role. Alright, so at the end of the day, we are going to get the role of the logged in user here. So if they are creator, they are going to have owner. If they are a member, then we are going to get the role from here, and then we are falling back to this one. So that is simple, right? Alright, so this whole thing going on here is to be able to get the role of the current logged in member. Once we get the role, we are going to use the role to calculate the permissions that the user is going to have. We've not added this function yet, but we will add it very soon. And here you can see we do get dot set project access. We need the permissions, we need the role, and then we need the is creator. So the set permissions that I used here, as you can see, we pass the permissions, we pass the role, and then we pass the is creator. So here we have the role, we have the is creator, and we are going to get the permissions from here. So let's before we add this, we also have the reset, which resets the permissions rules and then is created back to the default values, but it's empty objects. And then requires minimum role. We are defining a hierarchy of roles where each role has a numeric value. Right, so the higher value indicates the highest privilege or the highest role. Right, so you can see owners would have a value of 3, which is the highest, followed by admin, right, and then the read will be the least or the read only access. Now, when we come down here, what we are doing is we are getting the user's current role for this project from the store. So that's why we do get and then roles. We pass the project ID. Right, so if I show you that again, this is where we are setting it. Now for the roles for this project, we pass the role. Right, so here we are getting the current user's role for this project from the store here. Right, and here we are just checking if no role is found, then we don't have any access. But down here is where we are comparing the numeric value of the user's role and then the minimum required role. Right, so the minimum required role is going to be passed here. So let's say I want to use this requires min role, and then I pass admin. Alright, so I'm just basically saying that the logged in user requires an admin role to be able to perform this action that I'm using this function on. So this function is going to check if the logged in user, right, by the main role here, based on the numeric value assigned to that user, which is if an admin is passed, it is going to be 2. Right, so it is going to check if the numeric value of the user's role is it greater or equal to the required minimum role. So if it is right and the required minimum role is 2, then it is going to be false. It is going to return false here. Alright, so if I pass an admin here, so the user requires an admin role and the role of the logged in user is an admin, then it means this is going to return true and the user is going to be granted permission. Right, so it requires min admin is going to return a boolean, where if it is true then we give the user access, where if it is false we don't give the user access. So based on the minimum role we pass here, right, so just to make things clear, this is how the usage is going to be like. This is how we are going to call it, right? So requires minimum rule of right, which means we are saying that the logged in user requires a minimum rule of right to perform whichever action this function is called on. So we pass right here, and the logged in user is having a role of admin. It means that that admin numeric value is greater than the right, so it is going to give the user access. This is going to return true. If the user is if the current logged in user's role is read, it is going to return false because it is less, it's not greater than or equal to. And if the user is right, it is going to give the user access because the minimum required rule is right for that project. So this is basically saying that an owner would have admin permission, write permission, read permission. An admin would have write permission, read permission. Write would have read permission as well, together with their write permission. Yeah, so it's just a hierarchy which is saying that the highest privileged user would have access to actions that these users can perform. Hopefully you understand this one. Now I'm going to add the function we use to calculate the permissions. So here, as you can see, calculate permissions, it's accepting the rule, and this function is straightforward, easy to understand. Right, so for manage projects, so manage project actions, these are the actions that they have. So for a user to be able to manage project, then it means they can update the project, delete a project, close the project. Right, now we also have manage settings here, where they have view settings, view options, create options, update options, delete options, and manage members here as well. View members, invite, update, remove members. And for tasks, view task, move task, create task, update, delete. Yeah, and here for owners, they have manage project, they have manage settings, they have manage members, they have manage tasks. So here they have all the permissions, right, for owners. Now for admin, you can see that they don't have all of manage projects actions. They have close project and then update project. They don't have delete. Right, and then apart from that, they have manage settings, manage members, and then manage tasks. Now for write, they don't have any of the manage projects actions. Right, so they have view settings, view options, create options, update options, view members, and then all of the tasks as well. And then for read only, they only have view options, view members, view tasks, and then move tasks. Right. So these are the actions different users can perform. So at the end of the day, based on the user, whether the user is an owner, an admin, or a read-only user, all right, then we know the actions they can perform. So here, allowed actions, we do permissions rule, passing the rule, and then we're going to get the actions, all the actions the user can perform. So that when the action we want to give to the user is included in the allowed action, then it's going to grant the user the permission. All right, nice. So this might be a bit confusing, but hopefully you understand. It took me some time to be able to get all these together. All right, so it was it was based on different actions that I need, that I had to set these up. The usage is quite simple. If I begin to use it, you'd see that it is quite simple. The implementation here looks a bit confusing. All right, it took me some time to be able to put it together, but when I begin to use it, you'd realize that it is very simple. What I'm going to do is, I have this use as a store. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a hook which is going to make use of the store, and then I'll be using that hook instead. All right, so here I have the use project access hook here, and you can see I'm calling use as a store here. Here fetch project access. I also have requirement role is creator roles and then permissions, right? And make sure that I fetch the project access here, which is going to first of all load the logged in user. If they are not the creator, it is going to load from the project members, and then it will check the role of the user. All right, so this use effect is fetching the project access for that user. And here I've set up a couple of functions. All right, the first one is can, the second one is has main role, and here the can is basically used for the project action. Right, so we basically say can the user delete project. So we are going to pass the action here, and this is going to check permissions, which is going to return all the allowed permissions. Based on the project ID that we pass the action to it, and it is going to return true or false. And if not, we're going to return false, right? So if the user's action is included in the action, if the user's action is included in the actions that we pass here that are included in these permissions, then we are going to return true. If not, we are going to return false. And then this has main rule is also making use of the requires main rule, right, which is going to return true or false. Right, and at the end of the day, we have these things that we are returning from our hook use project access. So can the has main rule, we also pass the role here is creator, and then finally is loading. Wherever we want to check that a user has an access to a particular action, we can use the can and then pass that action we want to check against to the can. Wherever we want to check that this user should have a main role of this before they can perform this action, then we use this has main role. All right. And then if we want to check if the user is a creator, we can also use the use project access hook and then check if the user is a creator for that project. So we have different ways to check for users permission and then grant users different access to different parts of the project. So let's try and use it. So for example, if we go to projects here, settings, where we were doing, all right, so access here. So if we open this manage access component again, yeah, so for example here, we can say can the logged in user actually update or change the member role. We can do use project access, so const. All right, so I'm gonna use the can here. All right, and then when I come down here, I'm going to say can. Right, so let me bring the curly braces. All right, so can. All right, so can the logged in user perform this action, right? So I'm going to pass the action to it, which I'm going to get from project action. Let's remove this one from here, and then let's import this. So here we are saying that we only want to show this role select if the user can update member role. Right, so this is the action we are checking against this feature. Alright, so this is going to the can is going to ensure that the logged in user is having this action. So if the logged in user is an admin, it means this is going to return true because admins have these actions, project owners have these actions. Don't think right roles have these actions. So let's make sure we are importing this as well. Then we need to pass the project ID. So we have the project ID here, which we have to pass. Right, and then if we check this, and then let's get to the store. Right, so here you can see for permissions. All right, so under project members, so this is where we have the update member role. What so under manage members, and owners would have that, admins would have that, and rights don't have that, so they can't basically update the role of a member, right? Because they don't have that action. Alright, so it means when we do this, then this is going to display this for only admin and project owners. Alright, so we save this. Let's go and check. It should be there because there is a project owner, right? And as you can see, we still have this one showing. If we log into this user, let's log into this user in a different browser. All right, so as you can see here, the users don't see the role select because they have read access, right? So they can't even see this. Nice. You can see that they can't even see the invite user here because we have this if check here. So only admin and owners can see this component. So another place we can use this is even read-only users shouldn't be able to get to the settings page, right? So here we are going to another way we can check is if we go to the page here, if we go back to the code, let's go to where we have the board, I think. So up here, actually not this one, so the project details. Alright, so this is where we have the settings. So we have the project name and then the menu, which is this one. Now what we can do is we can also use the use project access here. So use project access, and then we need to pass the project ID, which we have here. And then we do const, and here we can use the can. We can also use the min or has min role. All right, and then what we can do is we can say only if the user has a minimum role of right. So has min role, let me say, where is the n? Close in here. All right, and then here I have to do this, and then I can choose the role that they should have, right? So only if the user is having a right access, that is where this is supposed to show for them, right? So users with a minimum of rights role can view the settings. So I would come here again, right? I would come here and see that this is gone. I can't see the ellipses for the settings because this user is having a read-only access. So that is how we are going to be using it. So it means I am going to go through like all the different pages, all the different features that I have here, and then I'm going to make sure I give permissions to different users based on their role. If the user is having a read-only access, they shouldn't be able to see this as well. Now, next up, we're going to focus on the Kanban board here. Right, we're going to look at how to add a task, how to drag and drop the task, how to open the task details, be able to add assignees and all that. So we still have a long way to go, but I'm going to be a bit faster, right? Some of this stuff, I am going to be putting them together and explain them to you because this is getting long. Yeah, let's see. Let's go through them. Now you can also see when I logged in back into the user who created the project, because they are owner, we see the settings back again, right? Nice. All right, so to speed up the process, I have added a bunch of hooks. Not a bunch of hooks, I've added some few more hooks to the ones we created. Now we'll go through them as we need them. All right. I have also added some other utility functions that we would need to the ones we created here. Right? So we would open and then go through them as we need them. But where we are going to start from is here. Right? So we go to projects, project ID board. Let's open this one. Let's open the column container as well. All right, so down here is where we have the add. Right, so here we should be able to add a new task. So we are going to implement the handle add item. All right, so here we are setting the is creating to true, and here we are getting the position of the task on the board. All right, I am going to show you what we have here. So here we get the lowest column position, and this is because of the priority based tasks. Right, so I have a function which calculates the lowest column position. So when you create a new task, it is always going to place it at the bottom of the task, right? So here get the lowest column position is as you can see, we pass the column task here, and then it's going to get a position number for us based on the number of tasks we have here. We are going to get the position, and the position is not just the index of the task. They are numbers that we actually create. Let's open this function, right? Get lowest column position. It's going to say if task.length is 0, it's going to start from 10,000. Right, so what we are doing is we are assigning a high number to the first task on the board. And when we add a new item to the task, we are going to subtract 100 from it. Right? If it's actually less than 100, then we are going to subtract 10. If it is less than 10, if the lowest position, then we're going to subtract 9. If it is less than 1, then we are going to subtract 0.1. You would understand this well once we get to have a lot of tasks, and I show you how it looks like in the database. Alright, so for now, just take note that we are using this get lowest column position here. So we also have the other functions we have here is get column sorted tasks, and we also have the sorted tasks here. So sorted task is going to be sorted based on priority, and also based on the priority order. It is also going to be sorted based on position, so priority first and then status position. I'll show you all this if it is confusing. We are just getting started. Alright, so here we are just calculating the lowest column position. Alright, so let's just save this one. And here we are doing create, right? So we are creating a new task. So the task utils function that we have, so we are calling the create, which is going to insert a new task. All right, so let's close this for now. We will come back. So we do task utils.create. We pass the details here, including the status position, which is going to determine the position of the item. If it is the first item that we are creating, then it's going to give it that 10,000 position number. All right, and here it's going to say task created successfully, and we are calling this on task created as well after this is created. Right, so that we refresh the column tasks immediately locally. Yeah, and then here we are doing, so we call this, and we are setting the input box that we enter the task in. We reset it to an empty. All right, and then we set the show input to false so that it hides it. Okay, so now let's see whether we have passed this prop on task created. You see we are getting it here, but where we are using the column container, here we need to pass that as well. So we're going to say handle task created, and then here let me say, yeah, let me put it here, which is going to say set tasks, and we have to create that state as well. All right, now how are we going to get the project tasks? All right, so we need to load all the project tasks for this particular project, for the project we are looking at. So I'm going to use the hook I created for that called use project queries, and then we pass the project ID. So let's import this. All right, so this hook contains a lot of different queries relating to the project. All right, so let's have a look. Let's remove this one. We would use it later, but let's have a look. So here you can see use project queries. We have the query to fetch the project task, and as you can see we are using React query here, right? So use query, and here we are fetching the project tasks. Now here we are fetching the project members, we are fetching the labels relating to projects, we are fetching the statuses, priorities, sizes, and here it's a reload function, right? So it does an invalidate, right? It invalidates the queries. This is reload when we want to reload the project task. This is reloading the members, reload labels, status, priorities, sizes, and all that, right? So whenever there is an update to like the project members, then we will call reload members, then it will refresh the members. Same for all the other reload functions that we have. So you can see they are all doing invalidate queries, and then we have the appropriate keys passed to them. Nice. Now you can see we are missing some of these, right? Like the fields, get priorities, get sizes. Let's add them to the utility functions here, right? So projects, we have members, we have management, right? So we have to add the fields as well. So let's club this one. Let me say fields. All right, so here I have the actual queries. So for the fields, we have get statuses, get labels, get priorities, get sizes. All right, so these are the fields we have. So let me save it, and then let's go back. All right, so we have different queries that does different things, right? So when we need them, then we call them from use project queries hook. Nice. So let's go back. Right, and then here we are using the project tasks. All right, so we load the project task, and then we create a state for it. We add the default project, we add the initial project task here, and then here we are also going to make sure we update it whenever the task changes, right? So let's put this use effect here. So whenever the project task changes, we are going to set the tasks, and here we are also going to make sure we sort the tasks based on the created dates. So I showed you the function, the sorted tasks function, Let's import that from utils sort. So it is sorting the task based on priority, status, position. And then for getting the tasks for each column, you're going to add this function get column tasks here, and we're going to import this from the utils sort function as well. So based on the column ID, we are going to get the column tasks and then sort them as well, right? So now here we are going to this is column container, and we are going to pass get column tasks, and then we pass the task.id. So for every column, we are going to get the task on the column. All right, so let's add a new task to this column. All right, so let's say task 1. Let's hit enter, and we see that task is created successfully, but then it doesn't show up here, and that's because I mean, if we refresh it, we would see that it will show up here, and as you can see, it is here. All right, but then we want to also make sure that when we add the task, we get it to show straight away. Oh yeah, I thought we did not add this, but we have it here, and here we have on task created. Oh yes, we are not calling. I think we made a mistake here. We have to pass it like this, or if we are doing this, we have to add the bracket here to call the function. So let's remove this one, and then let's save it, and let's add a new task. So we can add it here. So task 2, click add, and as you can see, it shows up here. All right, and we refresh. All right, it is still there. Nice. So we are able to add a task. We are able to see the tasks here. Now we can move these items. All right. So let's add some more tasks actually. Let's say task 3. Hit enter. Let's add task 4. Nice. So we're able to add a new task here. We can add tasks to any of these columns. All right, so now let's work on making the drag and drop work for columns. But before that, let me show you the task for this project in the database. All right, so let's go to tasks. So let me actually remove all these sorting, and then filtering. All right, yeah, so there are a lot of tasks here. So there is the ID, there is a description created at the status ID, which is the column that the task is on, and it's referencing the statuses. We also have the title, status, position, and you can see that we have some numbers here, right? Some numbers assigned to we have some numbers for the status positions, and here we have project ID created by, updated at, priority, size. These are all IDs referencing the tables here, and we have start date and then end date. Right, now you can see that we have priority, we have size, but we don't have labels. That's because we are saving, because labels are going to be more than one. Alright, so because task labels are going to be more than one, it's going to be a list of labels. We have a junction table for that, which is the task labels. So task labels would have all the labels assigned to a particular task, and it is the same for task assignees. We can assign one or more as users to a task as assignees. So we have that as a junction table as well. So when we look at the tasks for the project we are working on, so we can do a filter here, and then we do add filter. Let's do by project ID. Then let's paste the project ID here and then do apply. Now, when we filter, we see that these are the tasks for that project. Right? So task 1, 2, 3, 4. And here you can see that there is you can see from the status position that these are sorted, right? So we have 10,000, 10,000, 9,900, 9,800, right? And these are based on the fact that here you see we have task 1 and then task 2. Task 2 is the only task on this column, so it is assigned 10,000 status position. And when I begin to add other task here, then it will subtract from the so if I drag this task and add it below here, then it's going to subtract 100 from this, the position of this, and then assign that position to this. So what we are doing is, let's check the status ID. Right, so here, if we group them by status ID, so let's do a sort by status ID, right, and then let's apply. And then we are also going to sort by the status position. So let's add some sorting here, right? Status position, apply. I think. All right, so let's do this one first. Yeah. Actually, let's do ascending. Oh, not this one. Sorry. Yeah. So here we can see that now for this status, so you can see the status ID is the same for this one, which means these three tasks are on the same status, and it is it's being sorted from highest to lowest, which means this one is first, this is second, this is third. Right, and you can see that it subtracts 100 from the number before it. Right, so if I add another item, it's going to subtract 100 from this, which is going to be 9,700. Right, so that is how the position numbers are being assigned when we are creating new tasks. Now, when we are dragging and dropping, we are going to, because I can drag a task and put it on top here, it's not all the time that I'm going to be putting the task beneath it. So if I'm dragging and then putting it on top, instead of subtracting, it's supposed to add 100 to the status position of this for the task I am putting on top of that. All right. And what if I am putting it in between two tasks? Then how does it do the calculation? It means it's supposed to get the status position of the two and then divide by 2 and assign it, right? So some calculations going on here. We would look at a bit of it. Alright, so that is what helps us do the drag and drop safely, being able to move priority items and then they move on top, being able to drag in between items, below items, and stuff like that. I just gave you an overview of how the status positions are being calculated, so hopefully you get it when we are dragging and dropping tasks. Alright, so first of all, to make the drag and drop work on columns, that is where we have the column container. We have to make sure we put them in a DnD context, that is a drag and drop context, which I am going to down here. So let's import it. Alright, just to make sure that all our columns are within a DnD context. Now, to make a column sortable, we can go into the column container, and when we go to the template, where we have the list of tasks, right, that is where we are going to make sortable. So we don't want to include where the header is, where the description is, or where the add task button is. So here, this section is where we want to make sortable. So here we are going to do sortable context. Sortable context. All right, so we're going to make sure this section is within a sortable context. Let's import it. Okay, so that's imported already, I think. Yeah. We need to make sure we parse the items. All right, so items. we can do column task, but then we just want to map the IDs. Right, so all right, and here we do, let's say, as unique identifier, just to resolve the type issue. The ID is supposed to be a type of unique identifier, and this is a string, so it's complaining. And then we would also add the sorting strategy. Right, we are doing vertical sorting strategy. We need to make sure we import that. Let's also add this ID here. Now, for task items to be draggable, we need to go into the task item here. And just like we did for the options, we are going to do use sortable, which we are going to import. DnD context sortable. Let's import this guy. And I need index here. I also need to import CSS from DnD kit utilities. So let's put that here. And yeah, this guy should go away. Alright, so now we can add the props to this one. So we do set node ref, style, attributes, and listeners because we want to grab the actual task card and be able to drag it. So we will add everything on this div. Alright, so we're also going to add the is dragging element here. And then finally, we are going to add a drag overlay. So for that, we need to go to where we have the DnD context here. We are going to put an overlay here. Let's import, and then we are using the task item like this, and we have to make sure we are putting this in a React portal. Otherwise, we are going to have a weird behavior. And then we would need to also get the active task, which we would get soon. So let's put this in a portal. All right, so to set the active task, I have handled this handle drag start function here, which accepts the event, the drag start event, and I check event.activeTask.data.current.type is equal to task. Now, in task item here, you can see that we are setting the type as task, right? And then we actually adding the task as the item that we receive here as well. And here we also add one more property, which is the position as the index. Now, this position here is not the status position, right? As you can see, I'm passing index here, right? So we would use it to get that item in the array and then be able to get the status position, right? I think it's a bit confusing using position here because it will look like it's the status position, but let me mention to you so that you don't get confused. It is the index, right? I could have named it index though, but that's fine. All right, so here we check if the type is task. We know that we are dragging a task, so we set the active task, which is a state up here. All right, we set it to that task. Event.active.data.current.task. That's one. So we are going to pass this to DnD context. So on drag start. So down here. And then we're going to pass handle drag start, which means that we would also have the active task anytime we start the dragging, so it will be able to set the overlay. All right, so now let's go and then test and see how it is looking like right now. All right, so let's see, can we drag it? Yeah, we can drag it. All right, so when I move it up here, as you can see, it goes. Now if I move it here, it's gonna come back. All right, nice. But we are able to drag this, right, as you can see. All right, so with the logic behind the drag and drop, I don't want to confuse you even more. I don't want to also bore you with like all the logic behind the drag and drop and the and status position calculation, priority calculation, right? So what I'm going to do is I am going to give you the explanation, the theoretical concept behind it, and then yeah, hopefully you'd get the logic behind how I did my calculation, right? And to help me explain to you in a basic way for you to understand, I explained the logic behind my calculation to ChatGPT so that ChatGPT can break it down in a simple way, can explain it in a simple way for you to understand, right? So let's switch to ChatGPT and then look at the explanation that ChatGPT gave. We will go through together. Alright, so here you can see that we have the sorting algorithm here. We see to display task in the correct order. First of all, we group by priority, right? So task can be assigned a priority or they can have no priorities, right? So when you create a new task, they don't have any priorities. You can decide to assign a priority to the task, and priorities have orders, right? So priority 1 is less than a task with priority 2. A task with priority 3 is less than a task with priority 4. All right, so in that order. So it means that even with priorities, there are orders, right? So if a task is having a priority 4 and one is having a priority 3 or 2, it means that the one with priority 4 is supposed to appear on top of the lower priority task. Right, so first of all, we group the tasks by priority. Right, so we separate tasks into two groups, those with priorities and those without priorities. Right, so we create two array list and then we group the task and then sort each group. Right, so for priorities, we sort them from highest to lowest. So for priority task, we're going to sort them based on the priority order from highest to lowest. So it's going to be in order. And then for non-priority task, we are going to sort by the status position, right? So highest status position is going to stay at the top, lowest at the bottom. And then after we do the sorting, we are going to combine the groups, right? So we are going to make sure we place the priority items first, followed by the non-priority items. All right, so because priority items are going to be on top and we've already sorted these, right? So when we combine them, then it's going to be sorted for us in the correct order, how we want. So these are the steps we use to group the task based on their priorities and then their status positions. And the second part is where we do the recalculation of status position, right? Now, even tasks with priorities are supposed to have status positions, and it is calculated based on their position on the board. And the reason is that there could be two tasks with the same priority. So if two tasks have the same priority, then it means that it is going to display them based on their status position. So the higher status position is going to come first, and then the lower status position is going to come after. So even if tasks are having the same priority level, then they are going to fall back to the calculation is going to fall back to the status position. Right. So when we place an item, depending on where we are placing it, we look at the priority. If the priority is higher, we assign the higher status position to it. If it is lower, we assign the lower priority to it, depending on where it is being placed. So when tasks are moved within or between columns, update affected tasks only. Now, this is one thing that I was very key to me. What I didn't want to do is to recalculate the whole task within a column and then like update all the tasks once a task is moved. What I wanted to do was to be able to only update the task, the particular task which has moved, without having to update the database for the task which haven't moved at all, right? So we are only going to make sure the affected task is updated in the database, and that is the reason why we assign the numbers to it, right? So we identify the task in the column where the item is moved. We reassign status position for all tasks in that column. So this part, even though this part is saying we reassign status position for all tasks in that column, we are not recalculating the status position numbers for all of them. So we are only calculating the status position for the moved task, right, by adding, subtracting, or doing a division if it is placed between two items. So all the other tasks are going to have the same status positions as they have, but the moved task is going to, the status position of the moved task is going to change. So we are going to identify that task which is moved, and then we are going to calculate it by either adding or subtracting or dividing two tasks and then giving it the status position of the two. So for example, we are going to assign numbers like 100, 90, 80, and so on instead of 1, 2, 3, right? So that we can have room for like in between items, like when we place items between them. So even though ChatGPT suggested that I have numbers like 190, I had already decided to use even larger numbers, right? Starting from 10,000, and then it will subtract 100, 100, 100. So by the time it gets to maybe 100, I mean, we have a lot of tasks on that, on a particular column. And when it gets to 100, it does not subtract 100 again. It begins to subtract 10. And when it gets to 10, it begins to subtract 1. When it gets to 1, it begins to subtract 0.1, right? Now, the next part is the movement, like handling the movement. So moving task within the same column. So we find the task which is moved, we shift the status position of the surrounding task to fit the new position. So here, so if I move it between two tasks, I get the task on top and then the task below. I get the status position of those two tasks. I divide by 2 and then I assign it as the new status position of the task I am moving. So it's going to be in between. And then we are going to update the database for only the task moved. So when we are moving across columns, it means we are going to change two things. We are going to change the ID of the column, and then we are also going to change the status position. All right. Nice. And here it says efficient database update, batch updates, transaction control. All right, we don't really need this one. Algorithm simplified. Okay, so this is more like the overview, everything that I just explained to you. Sort task group by priority, sort each group as needed, reassign status position when moving, identify affected task in the columns, assign new positions with gaps, update the database for changed tasks only. All right, so then this is an example, this is a scenario. So for task in column, so let's say the column is to do, and we have these tasks. All right, so task 1, task 2, task 3, and then task 4. And you can see the priority for task 1 is 3, the priority for task 2 is 1. And these two tasks don't have any priorities. And the status position for this one is 100, 90, 80, 70. Now, alright, so when we are doing the sorting, it's going to appear like this. T1, T2, T3, T4, right? It's going to, after is, so it's going to group these, and then it will group the non-priority items, right? When it groups these two, then it is going to order them based on the priority number, like this. And then this one too is going to group and then order based on the status position. So for example, if the priority, we have two items with the same priority, then it means that the status position is going to change. The first one is going to have a higher status position. Yeah, and then I can share the pseudocode that I made it right with all the implementation with you, right? So I have a pseudocode here if you find interested, right? And when you look at this, it makes it a bit simpler to also understand. So yeah. So that is basically the logic behind the drag and drop. Now, since we've talked about it, let me go and then show you again from one of the apps that have a lot of tasks. All right, so here everything we talked about is been implemented here, right? So it took me some time to be able to get this to work well because there were a lot of edge cases to make this work well. All right, so here I have a couple of tasks, and as you can see, some have priorities, some don't have, right? So for example, this one is having a higher priority than this one. These ones don't have any priorities. So if I try to move this one ahead of this one, it's not going to work. It's going to come back to the previous position, right? Because priority items are supposed to stay on top. Now, when I come here, you'd see that all these ones have the same priority. So I can move this one in between here and it's going to work. I can move it in between here. It's going to work because they have the same priority. All right. And the calculation is calculated for, so it gets the status position of this one, and then this one, it divides by 2 and assign it to this, so that this is going to be able to move in between them. Right, so I cannot actually put it on top here. It's gonna come back. Yeah, so whilst I am doing this, let me also show you the network calls. All right, so we can put this on the side here so that we see what's going on here. So for example, if I try to drag this on top of this, you see that no network call is made, right? Because it's not even moving. It just comes back to its original position. So once it is not moving, no update is supposed to happen. But as soon as I move this one on top of this, you can see that we have some network calls. But the most important thing is that for the task, we have only one network call. Right, so here, this is a pre-flight, but then here we have only one network call. These calls are for the activities, because if I try to open, I think this is the task we moved. If I try to open, you see it's recording all these activities, right? That's why it is refreshing and all that. And then when I open, it's also loading the comment and stuff like that, like statuses and stuff like that. But the most important thing that I want to show you is that for the task, when I move it, it only makes one call. If I try to move this down here, it's gonna go here. You can see that there is only one task network call here. All right, and for items with no priorities, we can move them ahead of the other. Nothing is going to change. It's gonna work exactly the same. All right, so I can bring this one here. I can put this one on top of this and it's going to work. I can put this one in between. It's going to work fine because they don't have priorities. Now, if I want to put this one below here, it's going to move up because this one is having a priority and these ones don't. That is basically how it works. All right, so when we come back to the so this is the hook I am going to be using. So as you can see here, I have a hook here called use board drag and drop. So everything we just talked about, I have implemented everything and put it together in one file in this hook called use board drag and drop. And as you can see, let's start from down here. I have handle drag start, handle drag end, and then handle drag over, which are doing different things. And then in the end, I am returning these that I need whenever I am using the hook. So for handle drag start, it's very similar to what we wrote in the file in the component here. It sets the active item. And for handle drag over, let's talk about the over first. we are setting the column ID and then the over column ID and also the active column ID. So when I am dragging task over a column, then I am setting the ID of that column so that I can use it to do the highlighting, right? So when I come here, you'd see things like get priority task position on non-priority empty column, handle same column drag, different column drag, handle empty column, handle non-priority to priority move, handle priority level move, default position, non-priority column drag, priority column drag, and all of that. If I open one of these, yeah, you see that we are doing a lot of calculations here. It's like move task up, move task down. Let's check this one. Yeah, we have port.move task. All right, so this is where we do the actual database update. So you'd see that it is a query which is updating the status position and then the status ID as well. Right. So if we are moving from one column to another, we are moving the task, right? If we are moving on the same column, we are just updating the position, right? And this is getting all the project tasks. Okay, so yeah, I think you can have a look at this file and you can just copy and then paste it in your code. Make sure that all the properties are same as mine to make it work. Otherwise, if you get the concept I explained from the beginning, the theoretical concept I explained to you, then you should be able to apply it, like try it yourself, try and apply it, and maybe implement it bit by bit by implementing your own calculations and all that, right? But you would also have access to the source code, so you can use mine if you want, and hopefully it works for you. So inside index.tsx, I have use board drag and drop, and I'm getting all these. All right, so I'm passing the event handlers to the DnD context here together with the sensor. I am also checking is over. All right, so is over column ID is equal to the status.id, the status.id. So if it is over, then it's going to highlight that column. So we are going to do the other section where when you click on this, it opens the details where you can add assignees, add the task label, and then also see the activity timeline being recorded, and also change the description, add comments, and all that, right? And because this is really getting long, what I am going to do is I am going to go through the code with you. All right, because if you've watched up until this point, you might be getting tired of something because this is really getting long. And I feel like the most important thing is being able to understand the concept and also how I implemented maybe a particular feature. And when you have access to the code, you can use it, or you can try to implement it yourself using your own way. So we have two main sections to implement right now. So that is the details page here, where we would have the activity timeline and then the details for a particular task, and then also the insights page where we are going to have the charts and like look at the different visualizations based on the tasks we have. But I'm going to go through the code with you, the final code with you, and then we can probably bring this to a close. Here, if I click on one of these tasks, you would see that it opens the drawer, and here you can actually edit the details. You see the description where we are using the rich text editor that we built. So this is the read-only mode, and then when we click on edit, then it opens the editor. Right? And then here you can also try to add comments. Okay. You can assign priority, size, and then you can also assign a label. And notice that when I click on it, it does not make the server call straight away unless I click outside to close the pop-up before it makes the server call and then adds it. Right. You can also assign users. Right. So these are the two users. I can click on one to assign. Once you assign, you also see them here. Because I assigned a priority, this task moved up automatically. Right, it was down here, but it moved up here because of the priority. If I assign a higher priority, let's say priority 1, you can see from here. Right. So let's go through the code and I'll show you how it works. So you can see that here I have the task details component of the folder here. Alright, so we are going to start from the index. Now, before we talk about this, let's go to board task item. Now you can see that I've also pushed I've also committed the changes we made initially. Alright, so all the green files are gone. Alright, so you can see that down here on the task title, we call this handle click, which opens a drawer. Alright, so we have open drawer, which is coming from use task details. So I did set up a context API for the task details, right? And that was where I used the context API. So if I go into that component, so you can see that I'm using use context here, right? So here I am keeping track of things like the selected task, project name is drawer open drawer function, which opens the drawer, and then some functions to set the selected task, close drawer, update task title, task description, labels, size, priority. Yeah. Alright, so on the task details drawer, I am using this context to keep track of the state, everything that is happening there. So we have open drawer, which opens the drawer by setting the set is drawer open to true, close drawer sets it to false, and stuff like that, and things like update title. Yeah, we update the title of the task, and then we call this on task update so that we can also update the database from here, which I would show you. Right. Yeah, then same for the description and stuff like that. So that is how we open the drawer. Now here you can see that we have different components for assignees, task labels, for project, separate participants, and then we also have other actions. If we go into assignees, here you'd see that we are using some of the hooks that we created initially, and then we are also using the use task details here, but we are getting all the members just like we did when we were creating the project access. We are getting all the members, including the owners of the project, and we are returning all members. Now handle assignee toggle, here we selected assignees, and then when the pop over closes, we are doing update assignees, and then we also call reload project tasks, so that's we would have the changes showing immediately on the board. So update assignees, it's coming from use task queries. Here you'd see that this is where we get the task details. We updated that. This is the query for updating the description, updating the assignees, right? So this one, we do task.details.update. If we look at the actual query and we look at details and then update, yeah, we'd see that we pass the update here, right? And then if assignees in updates, then we are going to update task assignees table, right? So what I also did is that I made sure to add a lot of comments in the different parts of the code, so that when you are reading, you really, you basically understand what's going on. So when you have access to a source code, there's going to be a lot of comments in the code, and that's going to help you understand. Basically, some of the namings are just supposed to let you understand, but yeah, I also added the comments just in case you are still confused about stuff. All right, so we make sure that we are getting the selected assignees in a list, and then we are, whenever the pop-up closes, we are updating the assignees in the database, right? And I'm going to talk about activities shortly, but you could see that I am also creating an activity for things like assignees, right? And you can see content type user. I have a text here, self-assigned this on, and then this type date, the value, date, and some of these things. I'll talk about how we build the activity section shortly. But yeah, this is how we handle assignees, and this is also handling self-assigned, like if you assign yourself to the task, right? So we also call the same update assignees, reload task, and then we create an activity. And as you can see, self-assigned. So have a look at it. It's the same process for labels, for participants, and then for project. So project is where we have the priority calculation, and then the priority calculation is we have calculated new status position here based on the priority we assign to the user, we assign to the task. We calculate the new status position. We also handle the size selection, the date changes, and all that. All right, and then here handles the comment, right? So when you handle when you add a comment, it just saves the comment, right? So update comment, we have things like update comment, delete comment, yeah. All right, you can see that we are using the text editor here as well, and then here too. So here we render the read only. All right, and here we render based on the editable property. All right, so I feel like these are not really difficult to understand. So once you look at the code, you should be able to get it. Now, the one thing that I want to spend a little bit of time trying to explain to you is the activity section, right? So you can see I have this activity renderer here. Now let's go back to the project. If I click on this, now you can see that if I hover over this, we still get the user, right? Now here we get the tag, and the tag is being rendered using the like the tag renderer. Things like labels are being rendered here, so you actually see it in a nice formatted version. Things like dates and stuff like that are being formatted for you to see it well. So we are not saving the activities as mere text in the database. We are saving it as a JSON object. And what I mean by that is I also added a bunch of notes down here. So hopefully when you look at it, you should be able to understand it a bit clearer. All right, so for example, for different fields like status, label, priority, size, start date. So I didn't implement for priority and size, but for status, for label, and then for movement of task on columns like statuses, I'm going to be able to have a format like this, right? So for a task move, I should be able to say that this user moved this task from this status to this status on this date. All right. So I need to be able to get a format like this. Now you can see that here is supposed to be the user details, which is going to be an object. This part is going to be a string because it's just going to be this static text. This is going to be the details for the status. This is going to be also the details for the status that I am moving to. And this is going to be a date object. All right. So you would see that I am saving my activities like this. So I have a type, which is the user, which is identifying the user who moved or who performed that activity. So the ID of that user is being saved. And I have a string here. I have another type here, which is a status. The ID of the status 2 is a string. I have a type here, another one, which is a status. ID of the status on is a string. And then another object, which is of type date. All right. So I am, for my activities, I'm going to have an array of a combination of objects and strings. And for the objects, we are going to have objects with type user, objects with type status, object with type dates, object with type label. We are also going to have type users. So when we have multiple users, so for that one, we are going to save the IDs as a list. So the list of IDs of the users. Right. So what I mean by that is here, if I try to, so for the assignees, let me remove this user. And if I try to assign 2 users, right, it should be able to see that we assigned these 2 users, right? So Shadcn assigned themselves and then this user. So we have these 2 users to this on this date. Right, so these are 2 users and we should be able to render them separately. Right, so we save the IDs of the users, we have dates. Right, so for the possible types we are going to have, you're going to have status, label, labels, we are going to have date, user, users. Right, so this and this are going to be multiple, so we have multiple labels, multiple users, single label, single user. Right, so anytime I want to implement a feature, this is how I put together my thought process so that I will be able to implement it using this idea. So I have this idea down. Now it is time for me to implement it. All right, remove the unused import. So it is time for me to implement it. Now I have a handler to handle each individual, to handle every activity type. So for example, user, we also have users, we have status badge, we have label renderer, we have labels renderer, we have date renderer, and then all that, right? And down here, you'd see that I have a switch case. So for a user, if the item type is a user, then we are going to use this renderer. Right, so the user component, which is up here, which is going to show a user card based on the user's ID. Right, so we need to be able to get that user using their ID, because remember, for an activity, if the type is a user, we save the user ID, we don't save the whole user details. Right, so here, because we know the members of the project, we do all members dot find, and then where the member ID is equal to the item ID. Right, so the activity item ID, that is if and the activity is a user. And for a status, we render the status badge. For a label, we render the label, we use the label renderer. For labels, we use the labels renderer, which is going to loop through because there are multiple labels. For a date, we use the date renderer, and then for users, we use the users renderer. which is a user's component, right? So yeah, we handle it individually so that for every activity type that we have, we would be able to render it differently. So if I have a different activity type, I am going to add a new renderer here to handle that. Right. So if you check my type here, you would see that, yeah, so these are my activity types, right? So status, label, labels, date, user, users. And then we have the activity payload, ID, value, and then IDs. So where we have like multiple items, we have IDs. Where we have one item, we have ID for user. And then for a date or something, we have value. So the activity object is going to look like this. If the type is status, then we are going to have the ID. If the type is label, it is going to be an ID. If the type is labels, it is going to be IDs. If the type is date, then we're going to have the value. If the type is user, we are going to have an ID. If the type is users, we are going to have IDs. So I created the activity, I created a task activity, and I make sure it is a combination of string and activity object. Right, so finally, this is how the activity is going to look like. Right, so this is the database column. Right, so ID created that, and then the content is the actual task activity, which is a combination of string and objects. And you can see it's an array as well. Right. So yeah, there is also an activity response here, which is more like which extends activity. Right, but then it omits the user ID because we don't need that. We have the user details. Right, so we get the user details as part of the response. Right. So that is the activity, right? And you can see to build the actual timeline, we also have the comment, which is for comments, we have the content as well, right? So it's very similar to the activity. It's not like it's very similar. It's the same as the activity, just that the content is a task activity, but this one, the content is a string. So at the end of the day, our timeline is going to look like this, right? So we have the ID created at type, timeline type, which is going to be either activity or comment. And then the value is going to be activity response or comment response. So we combine activities and then comments, and then we put it on our timeline. So we are just going to order them based on the created date, created at date, because they all have the created at date. All right. And then it's going to sort them out. So in the end, we have this. All right. So you can see this is a comment, and the activities are appearing under the comments because this comment was added before these ones. So if I add another comment and I click add, then it is going to appear here. If I try to maybe perform any other activity, then it's going to appear under. So that is how our timeline looks like. So hopefully you get the concept. All right, so finally, let's go to insights. So here we have under projects, we have insights. And here you can see we have some charts, bar, column, line, stacked area, stacked bar, stacked column. So these are all different charts that we are rendering. And as I said, I am using recharts. You can see that I'm importing all these components from recharts. And to build a chart, you'd have a chart container and then the actual chart, which is a bar chart here. So I'm calling it bar chart because I have this component named as bar chart. So I can just call it bar chart, but you can see that's called bar chart and I'm renaming it as bar chart. And here we have the x-axis component, the y-axis component, chart tooltip, we have the legend, and then for each of the bar, we look at the keys that are coming from here, which I am going to talk about shortly. So it's the same thing all the other charts. So this is a column chart. You can see that it's the same bar chart here. And for line chart, you can see I am doing line charts. Stacked area. Yeah, I'm using area charts. So for the chart, let's go to the app and then come back to the code. All right, so we go to insights. All right, and you can see that we have only one task on backlog. We have 3 tasks in progress. All right, and we can switch to line charts. It is the same thing. So for backlog, we have 1 chart, no charts here. Here we have 3 charts, all right, and no charts here as well. Now, for the x-axis, we are showing status, but we can also use labels. All right, so we have enhancement label 1. Then we don't have any other label again. So if we go back, all right, so there is only one task with a label, and that is enhancement. If we try to add a label to this one, let's say bug, and we go to insights again. All right, so if I go to labels, you can now see that for bug we have 1 label, for enhancement we have 1 label. And this group by is also an extra grouping where we group by size. All right, so we are saying that we want to show the task by labels, but we also want to group them by size. So when we check here, we will see that we have 1 enhancement task, and then the size that we have in there, we have only 1 for small. So if you go back again, you'd see that here the enhancement task is small. Alright, so that is how it works. Right, so it shows the number, it shows an insight of the different tasks based on priority, based on labels, based on sizes that you have on your board. Alright, it is the same data that we are showing for different charts, right? So we can group by size, as you can see. Small, medium, we can group by priority. All right, we can change this one, change it to stacked column, line, column, yeah, bar, and all that, right? If we look at the insights page, all right, so here we have the layout, which is chart layout. So for chart layout, we have bar, column, line, stacked area, stacked bar, stacked column, right? And then here we have the x-axis group by default it is status, and then this one is none. And here is where we have the chart renderer. And you can see we are also loading the initial data here, which is the tasks, the statuses, the labels, the sizes, the priorities, so that we can use it to do our calculation. Now, if we go to the chart renderer here, this is how the data looks like, including the layout. So this is where all the magic is happening, where we generate the chart data. And here we are also selecting the particular task based on whatever chart we've selected. Alright, so here we build the chart, which is this, and then based on the chart it is going to render these components. Let's go to where all the magic happens, which is generate chart. So you can see that I have this data generators here. All right, and we have things like status none, label none, size none, priority none, status label, status size, status priority. This is a combination of when you select the x-axis and then the group by. So when I select this and this, it is going to be status priority. So status priority is going to be this. So it is going to call this function here, which is going to say get task by status grouped by field. And what this does is, as you can see, I have all the functions here, which does the grouping based on the field. All right. So I have different groupings for different selection pairs. So you can have a look at all the functions I have here, which is doing the visualization. All right. So at the end of the day, it is going to generate the data pairing that we have for the different charts. And we are going to get it in a format that we can pass to the chart for the chart to understand. I'm going to say none here. So if I select status none is going to be the first one. If I select size, this is none. Where is size? None. So size none is this one. If I select let's say status here, size status, and you can see that when I select status is not available here anymore, right? Because you can select status. And the same way when I select size here, size is not available here anymore. All right. So if I select size and maybe labels, size label, all right, which is going to call this function. So in different functions to render different data. Also, before I was able to get to this, I had a thought process of how I wanted to do it. So if you see here under my thought process folder, here I have charts. All right, and here I put together some few notes of how I want the data to look like so that I can pass it to the chart. So for size, we have things like backlog, in progress, and then we have all the sizes, right? All the sizes like this. For priority, we have the status, backlog, in progress, not in program. We are going to have the priorities like this. And then you can see that we also have no size here. So for tasks that haven't been assigned any size or any priorities or any label. All right, and then for labels we have this. So you see, this is for size, status, priority, status, label, status. Right. So we are doing the logic for status. When we come to labels, we have things like the label count, but then for grouping by size, we have the label, and then we have the sizes. Grouping by priority, we have the label, we have the priorities. All right, and then for for the others as well. Right. All right, and then I added some notes here as well. Whenever you want to implement a certain feature, try and put together your thought process, right? And the thought process is going to guide you to come up with the solution bit by bit, small, and eventually you are going to end up with something which is very, very huge. I am happy to draw the curtains here, and hopefully I was able to teach you something for you to get something out of it. I actually took note of some enhancements that I could do, but what do you also think are some enhancements we could add to this project? Let me know in the comments section. And as I said, the source code is available on GitHub. I have added the link in the description, so make sure to check it out. Any part that you missed, any part that I didn't really I didn't really talk about properly that you think you need, that you think you actually need it, you can have a look at the source code, and then you can maybe grab the code for the part you need and then maybe use it in yours. So thank you for watching, and I am going to see you in the next video.